Hello, culture makers. Welcome. Today, I am doing this Facebook Live series around the principle that everything that has been used against you is a source of power. I'm Kelly Diels, and this is Toi Smith. Toi Smith is a growth and impact strategist, and she's the founder of Black Women Are Love and Business for the People. And Toi and I have known each other for several years and have alternated working in and on each other's businesses. We've collaborated on a lot of things and been thought partners and influenced each other in the way that we show up in our work. And something that Toi and I have in common is that we both have 4 kids. And I have been a single mom at times in my life, and Toi is a single mom. And we've talked a lot about the intersection between motherhood and work and how that shapes the way we move in the world. So thanks for being here, Toi. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. I love talking to you, so it's wonderful.
I love talking to you too. Yes, it is. This feels like such a joy to be here with you today. And one of the things that we have talked about a lot when we're talking about our business is the way that when we started our businesses, we had no idea that this was going to be this self-help spiritual journey that we were embarking on. We thought we were just trying to make money. But along the way, you have to develop all these capacities to deal with things that you didn't know you were going to have to deal with.
Yes, I think true. And, when you're working for someone else, there's a system, there's a structure, there's all these things put into place. You're kind of told how to be a lot of the times, depending on the work. And so when you become an entrepreneur and have to fend for yourself in all of the ways, especially when we look at entrepreneurs like solopreneurs who are one woman shows, one person shows, who are doing the marketing, the pricing, there is so much to uncover around the beliefs around what you think your worth is around money. And I don't inherently believe in tying worth to money, but that's how we're conditioned to believe in things, right? So how do I show up? How do I tell people about my work? You have to do some excavating to figure out how to do that and do it in a way that feels in alignment with yourself, to really step into being in business that's going to allow for a certain level of comfort and safety and taking care of the necessities, really.
Well, and the reason I brought this up is because I feel like what has happened for me, and I think what's happened for you, because we've talked about that, is being in business for ourselves means that the relationship between money and worth in our culture means that there are cultural injuries that have been imposed on us. And then when we're going through this process of growing a business and trying to earn a livelihood, we actually have, like you said, have to excavate those beliefs, and we have to kind of heal from cultural injuries that have been visited upon us and shame that's been imposed upon us that was really never ours to carry. And I brought that up because I feel like that's parallel to what happens in motherhood. So I feel like, okay, I didn't know when I started a business that I was actually going to go on this self-help journey. Had no idea that was the case. And I didn't know that was the case about motherhood either. I didn't know that I was going to have to grow as a person, unpack cultural injuries, heal from structural wounds. I didn't know any of that was going to happen. I didn't know I was pattern breaking. I didn't understand that that was what motherhood was. And I really didn't understand that motherhood is actually a form of leadership, right? You are in charge of everything.
Yes. And I love this cultural injuries, the way you frame that. And I think around motherhood, we're birthing a soul into the world, right? But in a sense, we birth a new version of ourselves every time we bring a new life into the world. And so there is a reckoning you have to do around your thoughts, around your body, around just your being in the space of just the universe. And when we look at single motherhood, right, it's all of that, and then all of the shame and all of the societal conditioning that comes into your worth as a woman now because you're a single mother, and there's stigma and there's barriers there. And so yes, it's a form of leadership, but you have to go through so much to get to see it to that
Yeah.
point. But by the time you get there, it's like, ain't nobody messing with me now.
Right. Well, and there's something that I noticed too when we were first getting to know each other, and we were talking a lot about motherhood and being single moms and the stigma we navigate. Here's something that I noticed. You could write something on your Facebook page about the challenges of single motherhood. And I could write something almost exactly the same. We both have 4 kids. And I could write something almost the same. And people would be like, you're amazing. You're so brave. You're so powerful. And then you would write the same thing. And people would be like pushing back and like, well, you made your bed, so now you got to lie in it. And like just the difference in the way that we have to navigate that experience is like the stigma is particularly acute for women who are racialized in a white supremacist culture.
Oh yeah, like listen, I shared recently. I wrote a blog post a long time ago around the different types of single motherhood, right, and how I
Yeah.
view them inside of just this one construct. And I went through and looked at some of the comments, and a lot of the comments were basically like, you made your bed and now you have to lay in it. And no one has sympathy that you have multiple babies' dads and you need to take care of your responsibilities. And this is how single mothers are, kind of thing. And that's like, and then I had some direct comments when I've written about single motherhood from mainly white men around like, now you're on welfare, like it's not our problem, kind of thing. And what it made me really realize, and I kind of knew this already, was that the idea of the stereotype of Black motherhood, especially single motherhood, and I fit a certain stereotype. I have 4 kids by 3 different men, right? So you look at me as a Black woman with that kind of motherhood, and I always talk about it's my motherhood. People, the assumption is like, oh well, she made her bed. She needs to do the things. There should be no help. We shouldn't look at the fathers that should be involved. It's all autonomous on the woman. She created the mess. And so my pushback on that a lot has been, I had relationships with men and it ended up having kids. Why am I the sole person that's responsible for that decision? And how come in our society, there isn't any consequence or any conversation around what men do when they leave homes or what men do when they decide to have children and not take care of them? Not even leave homes, but we don't even bat an eyelid when men are like, oh, I have kids I don't see or I don't talk to. You hear a woman say that, we're like, what is wrong with her? Like something, she must be crazy. She's not taking care of her responsibility. So once I really started looking at that, I was like, I'm doing what my end of the bargain was. I made an adult decision. I had sex. I had kids, and I'm taking care of my children. That has nothing, there is no harm in that. I shouldn't be ashamed about that or anything. But we also need to have the conversation around what patriarchy does and what misogyny allows for men to be able to engage in adult behavior and have kids and then not take on any responsibility.
Well, and I think if we look at it the way that you're looking at it, which is like through the lens of power, right? Unjust power, there's something that's revealed here, which is like, even if we look at the navigating stigma, something that's perplexed me for a while is, why is there this stigma against single motherhood? Like, why does that activate people? And why is it so acute for women of color? Like, as I was saying, we could say the same thing on Facebook and I will be congratulated. I have 4 children by 2 men. You have 4 children by 3 men. And somehow I'm a hero, and you're a problem. And that is, so I'm looking at that. And that's not to say I don't navigate stigma, because I do, but it's not as acute as what you navigate. And so I'm looking at like, what is actually the problem? Like, what are we activating in people? And I actually think there's this thing about who's allowed to have power, right? So women who are the heads of household, we're the boss. And I think that's a threat. And that's why there's a pushback. But it's a little bit more acceptable for a white woman like me to have power. So I don't get as much pushback as you do. I still do. But for Black women and women of color and Indigenous women who are structurally not supposed to be leaders or have power, the pushback is even more intense because we're activating, like we're undermining and flipping over the way the system works. This is my theory.
Mm-hmm. I tend to, I agree. And I also think, when we think about white women and motherhood, I always envision 2-parent household, women being taken care of, like the man works. Like that is, when I think of nuclear family, I think of a white woman and motherhood in that way. The traditional way that Black women have been stereotyped is that they are single mothers. We until recently, over the last maybe 10 years, a lot of the time, the stories that have been told about Black women in motherhood is the single motherhood.
Yeah.
That has proliferated so much of the media, the conditioning, just that is what we know. And so I tend to think, when you see a white woman who is a single mother and doing it, we're like, other white women are like, well, how? Because how does that work? Because you have been taken care of, and so how do you do it by yourself, kind of thing, right? Black women, I think, have always done it by themselves.
And I think that's probably part of the reason we're getting the different responses is people would look at me and think, something has gone wrong. She's probably been victimized. A man has done her wrong. Whereas people look at you and are like, well, that's just the way it is. And she's doing it all wrong.
Yeah. Or what did she do? What did you do? How do you what do you need to fix? Apparently, and listen, this is in families too. I remember my grandmother, one of the things she would say, because she didn't agree with me having kids out of premaritally, out of wedlock. She didn't agree with that. And so she would always say, well, that's just good enough. Black women are to get good enough, right? So if I could have stayed in any of my relationships that I had, any of the men I had kids with, I could have stayed with them. Would I have been happy? Would have been a healthy home? Would have been thriving for any of us? No. But society says to me that, well, if it's good enough, that's what you deserve, is good enough. So you should have stayed in that situation. And so for me, leaving all of those situations, I'm saying I deserve better than good enough. And so one of the reckonings that I had was that it was a choice for me to not be in relationship with the men that I had kids with. Not to say I didn't want them as a co-parent, but that I didn't want to be in relationship because we weren't good partners. Now, we could have been better as co-parents, but what happens a lot is once you decide that that's when men aren't held accountable in the relationship, typically, then it's hard for them to stay around for the child a lot of the times. And so that's what I've seen.
Right. And so then the bias that we're activating, and especially what you just mapped out, the bias that you are activating in other people is it's an assertion of self-worth and of value, and that you are a cherished, wonderful person in this world, in a system that devalues your identity and who you are. And so of course there's going to be backlash. So underneath the stigma and underneath the bias is this statement of self-worth. There is that that you are in your power and you're not going to settle for what our culture has told you you're allowed.
100%. And that's, I think, how I move with a lot of my decisions. I think making those choices has empowered me to make those particular choices and saying, I'm not staying in this unhealthy relationship just because I have a child. That is the story we are told as women repeatedly, is that you should stay because you have a child by this person and you're not going to make enough money. And how are you going to take care of yourself? And, you're kind of going to be left out in the street. And when I think about my grandmother, that was in her time the truth. How could you be a Black woman for the South and have kids by yourself? And, that's a heavy stigma.
My grandmother, sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say my grandmother stayed intensely violent
Mm-hmm.
relationship her entire life because she had children and because that was going to be the way that she provided them, and literally like almost lost her life, and what we've had to endure for that idea of like, that's what we do for our children. I actually feel like for me, it was the opposite became true, which is when I had children, it sharpened my boundaries. Like it forced me to hold higher boundaries. And it was like, if I would never allow someone to treat my children in this way, why is this person in my life treating me this way? And something I talked about with Vivian McMaster yesterday was this also like sharpened my boundaries around body image and dieting and made me reject diet culture, was I would never starve my children. Why on earth would I diet and starve myself? So for me, having children got me into my power because I was forced to treat myself with the same love and compassion that I treat my children with.
Definitely. And I see with my kids, I know they're watching.
Right.
And I have 4 sons, and they, as they've gotten older, they start to ask questions around like, how did you have, kids with, my dad and then my brother's dad. And so there's conversations that have to have honest moments around these relationships didn't last, but like there was love there and all of these things. And so I know that they're watching, and I knew that it was important in order for me to raise sons that had the opportunity to see healthy relationships. Like I didn't want them to see unhealthy, right? So in order for them to be able to see healthy relationships and to see that I was asserting myself in a way that was in honor of their sovereignty and in honor of us having peace, that I had to go. And so they're watching. And one of my big things is to make sure I have honest conversations around all of it. They can ask me anything. Ask me why, your brothers have different last names and what that means and like all of these things. But what it does, it makes them razor sharp, and they are, they have great boundaries, and they have a great awareness of the different ways that people live. There isn't a monolith of like, this is how it be. So that serves them.
And if they know they can trust us to tell the truth to them, then they know not to accept lies in other relationships. Like if we train them that we're going to lie to them, then they don't have that boundary up against people who deceive them. So like that's one of the first teachings. And one of the things we've talked about is that we're both trying to raise free children, like whole free children. And again, this comes back to, this has become a power source for me, because in order to raise whole free children, I also need to be a whole free person. Whatever I do to myself, I am doing to them. So this is like really forced me to heal those cultural injuries, do my own self-development work, break family patterns, break generational patterns, because whatever I want them to be, I have to be as well.
Exactly. And kids, my kids, like, they challenge me in a way that makes me stand up taller. They ask questions. I'm like, sometimes it hurts. I'm like, okay, all right. Like, you see that? They require a level of integrity that, like, if you're parenting in that way of like, all right, we can each be asking questions. There's a level of integrity that they require. And when they're autonomous and sovereign, then they want to ask you and be with everything, all of the questions. And sometimes raising free kids is the hardest thing because they are watching. And they are like assessing, and they're trying to put it all together. And then they are asking you like, why you told me to do this thing that you're not doing.
I literally had this happen last week, and it activated 2 things in me at the same time. So one was, oh my gosh, I'm failing. And then, oh my gosh, I'm winning, which, so my daughter and I had a tiff in the evening about her eyeliner, and I was not appreciating the style in which she was applying it. And I made a joke about it, and she was upset. And in the morning, I came into my office and I had like a page-long letter, like 5 paragraphs. It was a full-on essay, well-structured, well done. She's 13, explaining why that was wrong. I shouldn't comment on her appearance. It's her form of self-expression. It's not my business. And I would never do this to one of my clients or students. And therefore, I should not do it to her. And I was looking at this, I'm like, point taken. I'm a terrible mother. I have failed at life. and I'm an excellent mother. Look at this child advocating for herself and holding me accountable. Like, this was amazing. It's not her job to parent me, but it is her job to advocate for herself. And the first place she's going to learn to do it is with me. So if she can do it with me, she's going to be able to do it out in the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like my sons right now, you know, since we're all home, are they've come up with a new term, like just the other night, called mamatizing, where like they wanted their room rearranged, and so they did it. And I don't agree with the way that it looks. I'm like, I mean, I don't like it. And they're like, well, it's our space and we enjoy it. We are comfortable in here. And as long as we keep it clean, like, can you not mamatize it? Like, they don't want me to come in and like
put your print on it.
Put my print on it because it's the space that they're in. And I had to sit with that. Like, you're right. Like that's a control thing.
Right.
And that's not what I'm wanting to do. And when I really see so much of their power is in school, especially with my twins who are in 5th grade, the teachers even say they're so critical, like they have a critical analysis on everything, and they ask questions, and they understand what a good boundary is for them, and they understand like when they're being wronged, and they speak up about it. And that is, if anything, so great, because school is a system. It's not perfect. It has a lot of flaws. And so to be able to have sons who are able to go in and question things and stand in like their power in 5th grade and be able to be like, well, I don't agree with that, and have a reason why.
Yeah. Well, they're resisting institutionalization. And so I've been talking about this with my daughters, where this is particularly visible because they're 13 and 16. Me getting free of diet culture means that my children have grown up in a home where I'm not visiting violence upon myself. And so they're kind of immune to diet messages. They're just immune to it. They've never dieted. They don't have issues with their body. They're just like, that injury, I did not inflict it on them. It's not to say they don't soak it up from other places, but they don't have the primary injury in the home. And because of that, those things don't dent them. And like, I think about how I've spent 20 years recovering from like sexism, from diet culture, you know, all the different things that I have like done work to heal from. And my children are going to be released into the world without those deep injuries. So they're not going to have to spend 20 years unlearning and recovering. They can just get to doing what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. I remember I had a recollection recently around, I never heard my mom talk bad about herself in front of me, ever. She never put down her body. She never said she was dumb. She always stood, like, of course she's not perfect, but my mom like always stood very tall and like was like really confident. And even in the times when I felt like I've made the shittiest mistakes, I've never put myself down. And so one of the big things I do around for my sons is I don't put myself down at all. But when I hear them do it, I have a conversation with them. And I try to understand where that's coming from. And I always ask them, like, how do you feel about yourself? Tell me something good about yourself, so that they, in a world that is, you know, they're Black boys who will turn into Black men who are racialized and who will be seen as savages and all of these things. Like, I want them to know who they are, that you're kind, you're empathetic, you are powerful, and all of these things now, so that they don't have to do healing later.
Exactly. And this kind of brings me to the point that I wanted to bring forward, was that motherhood is a form of leadership, right? Like, we are not injuring our children to fit into the status quo. We are raising them to be strong and powerful and whole and free, so that we can make a new world, and they deserve a better world, and we deserve a better world. But like, here's the thing is, like, in the work world, it's constructed that women who are mothers are not leaders, do not have the capabilities or the, you know, experience or knowledge to be leaders in the workforce. And yet we're like the bosses. We are CEOs. We are raising whole humans. We are responsible for every single decision in the house. And we have a vision and we are like
Yeah.
executing that vision. We
Yeah.
literally have every capability and skill and leadership ability, and it gets forged in our motherhood. And yet it gets held up as like, oh, you're not a leader. You can't lead. You don't have the skills. We have the skills, right? Motherhood is like this training institution.
Yeah, I think it's just how we've created a society that's very binary, where like women are, that role of motherhood as is seen as less than, because, you know, the role of nurturing and helping your kids learn how to be in relationship with each other and be in relationship with the world. And all of that is amazing. That is leadership, because they're going to be able to go form relationships later. You can meet someone who, you know, did not have a great parenting experience, didn't learn how to be in relationship with people, right? So being able to teach your kids, so it all learning starts at home,
Right.
So I feel like definitely motherhood is leadership, and we do everything you're talking about, from what we eat for dinner to what we are, you know, what we're watching on TV, to watching. One of my things right now is watching my sons and being like, okay, I can see you're interested in this thing. Let's nurture that. Like that is figuring out, that is seeing the gifts and nurturing it and allowing them to flourish and try different things. Then that's beginning to have a keen awareness. And so you bring that into any job, right?
That's team leadership.
That's team leadership.
Right. And so motherhood is this self-developer and like this leadership boot camp, right? You rapidly grow these qualifications. And yet it gets held up as like, it's actually the thing that incapacitates us from former roles of leadership. So I really, that whole thing irritates me, but I just want us to know that this is actually a source of power in our life. And you do not have to become a mother in order to self-develop. There are lots of other ways to grow these capacities, but I just want to underline that this is a place where these capacities get forged. And this is a source of power. And I think that's even one of the reasons that people push back on mothers and romanticize or stigmatize us or turn us into objects and symbols or put us on a pedestal or knock us down, but don't treat us as the whole free human leaders that we are. Because that would flip everything over.
It would. And I think, like for me, I don't know who I would be without, I know I'd still be pretty powerful, just inherently as being born on the earth, but my motherhood and the way my motherhood has transacted and happened over the last years has created such a fortitude in me, and has allowed me to be grounded in a way that not much sways me, because I understand what my goal is and what my role is and like what the vision is. I understand it. And so I take that into any work that I'm in. It's that just deep knowing. I take it with me. But that was born from the obstacles that came from motherhood. And that was born from having to make decisions when there was no one else to talk to, when you really have to be like, okay, how are we moving forward for them, for my kids, in the best way possible. Like I really had to get in touch with my beliefs around things. And that's why I'm always like excavating all the things. Like, why do I believe that way? And so, especially if it's triggering, if something my kids say to me or something that they believe, then I'm like, well, like what's that about? And so then I have to look at it for myself, because clearly there's an issue there.
Right. And one of the things I think both of us do for our kids is we're always contextualizing like the structures and systems and institutions they're navigating. So when you're saying like, we have to look at that and what's that all about? We have to look at like internally what's going on in our own psyche, but we also have to look like, how are we located? How is this getting shaped for us without our consent? And that skill is the thing that, like you were talking about, you're fortified. That skill of being able to contextualize the system, my kids have it and I have it. And what it is, it's a shame buster, right? It's like, oh, well, that's not mine. I don't have to carry that. I don't have to comply with that. That's not okay. And now I don't have to be ashamed of it personally. I didn't cause that. That's not my fault. I'm not going to carry it. And now I'm in my power. So what am I going to do?
Right. Yeah. Like it's even for them, like they can see so much and they can call out so much. And it really it makes me feel that they're safer
They are.
because
Yeah.
they understand what's true and what isn't, and what's theirs to hold and what's their responsibility and what isn't. And that is really powerful.
Right. So I just want to come back to this point of like, motherhood is a self-developer. And in order to raise whole, free children, we have to be whole, free people. And so, of course, motherhood puts you in your power. Of course it does. And yes, we're going to navigate all these dehumanizing, stigmatizing things. And then we collectively can push back on them and change them. But underneath that is this power opportunity, like the opportunity to be who you really are.
Yes, it is the opportunity to really understand yourself. And there's work there. There is
Yeah.
work there. Like, that's the thing I always drill home to people, is like, this didn't happen overnight. I was so sad for a really long time, like being a single mother. That it's painful. It really is. On top of not having support in a certain kind of way, like tangible
The
support,
labor.
the labor,
Oh,
the financial, like that there is deep sadness and reckoning and
yeah.
like grief there. And I still deal with that. But there's a choice to be made. And there's a choice I had to make of, no one's coming to save me. So what am I going to do?
Right. That for me, like when I came out of a relationship and was broke and literally had nothing, and he walked away with the BMW, like I had nothing and had been out of the workforce, had 2 kids under the age of 4, wasn't getting child support, that having my back against the wall is the reason that I now earn what I earn. And the reason I now have a successful business, the reason I am my own boss, is because I had my back against the wall and I had to get in my power and like get creative and get myself out of it. And so sometimes I think like my financial power and the way my financial power is growing, again, I can root that in my motherhood is like, okay, I've got these 2 little kids, I got no child support. Now what? Right? I'm going to fix this.
Yeah. I mean, that's mainly how I rock. Like,
right.
I mean, the reason I think a lot of questions I get is like, how do I do so much and how do I keep going with the vision and work as hard as I do? And, it is because I'm built that way. Like, that's just how I came into this world. But also it's because I have 4 kids that I am responsible for. There is nobody that is going to work as hard as I am for them. And I have seen that. My oldest son is 14.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have support in that way. And so I have had to hustle and grind in a way that now I'm able to be more, the word isn't secure, but I feel happier because I understand what it's for.
Yeah.
And it gives me like a reason to keep going. And my sons see me working for myself and they're so curious about that. And they're so curious around like, how do I do that? And how do you do it, Mom? And it just is layers upon layers of just freedom.
So my daughter has a store. She makes earrings and an online store, and she made her first 2 sales in the last 2 days. And like we are celebrating that, right? My kids are, like we're saying, they're always watching and they're learning skills that I didn't learn until I was in my 30s or 40s. So like the more we get in our power and the more they push us into our power, the more like we really are culture making. We're creating a generation that is emotionally whole and literate and scrappy and resilient and brilliant and able to be in relationship without harming each other.
Yeah, the one thing I want my children to take away from everything that we've been through, or that how I teach them, is to see the possibilities and to be curious. I think one thing that the systems of oppression do is they dismantle your ability to be curious and to see the possibilities and to vision and to be future thinking, because you're so consumed with now and your safety. And so if I can make sure we're safe, and if I can make sure they understand that they are safe, they can think about the possibilities, and they can think
experiment.
about experiment, and they can
Yeah.
be being curious and think that, and not be certain about everything, and know that that's okay, and they're still all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toi, I have loved having this conversation with you. Like, I get so excited to talk to you about anything, really. But like, we always are navigating between like the internal psyche piece, like our personal power, our personal capacities, the work that we're doing spiritually and emotionally, and the system. And I just feel like I want people to know that navigating between those two levels is how you get out of the shame and into your power, right? Then you don't have to carry like, oh, something's wrong with me. Like, no, probably nothing's wrong with you, but everything is wrong with this world that we live in.
Yes, yes. You learn how to not internalize
Right.
the things, right? So I'm not eating that. I'm just not taking it. I don't believe it to be true.
I tell that to my kids all the time, is that it's like infection and injury, right? Like, the infection can't set in if there's no injury for it to colonize, right? So I'm just like, if we don't inflict these wounds on each other, there isn't any place for that infection to get in.
Yep.
So
True.
that's what I'm thinking about. But thank you for doing this with me, Toi. This has been such a joy and a delight. And I want to encourage people to go check out your work at, tell us your website.
You can find me at www.toimarie.com, and you can find all of my work there. Business for the People, which is my wonderful community, and how I feel about certain things through my blog. So
yeah. Toi's such a brilliant culture maker, and I love being in your world, and I cherish your friendship. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Kelly. I love you so much.
I love you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.